Call the Village of Riverside Board of Trustees regular meeting for Thursday, April 6, 2023 to order. If we could please stand for a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Trustee Pollock will be a few minutes late this evening. Ethan, if you could please call the roll.
President Ballerini.
Here.
Trustee Evans.
Here.
Trustee Clarity.
Here.
Trustee Marshazga.
Here.
Trustee Hannan.
Here.
Trustee Gallegos.
Here.
Manager Francis.
Here.
Attorney Molina.
Here.
Also present, Clerk Sol.
Thank you. President's report today, I have a couple of things. One is a proclamation for Arbor Day. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas the holiday called Arbor Day was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. And whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world. And whereas trees can reduce erosion of topsoil by wind and water, purify the air and water by reducing pollution, and create plant and wildlife diversity. And whereas trees have been shown to reduce crime, increase property value, but reduce heating and cooling costs and conserve energy use. And whereas trees can beautify our parks and streets, improve the quality of our urban environment, and carry on the tradition planned by the inventive vision of Frederick Law Olmsted. And whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Whereas the Village of Riverside plans to plant 2 bur oak trees at the Long Common and Kent Triangle Park to celebrate as part of the Volunteer Landscape Work Day on April 29th. Now therefore, let it be resolved that I, Joseph Ballerini, Village President, proclaim the day of April 29th, 2023 as Arbor Day in the Village of Riverside. And I urge all citizens to plant and care for trees to gladden the heart and promote the protection and care of trees within our community and woodlands. In witness thereof, I have set my hand and affixed the seal of the Village of Riverside this 6th day of April, 2023. The second thing I have is, over the past several board meetings, we have had preliminary discussions surrounding the Lead Pipe Replacement Act, a state unfunded mandate that has huge repercussions, not only for the safety and security of our water, but also budgetary effects, especially for a small, older community like Riverside. We have discussed strategies to fulfill this mandate while being cognizant of the costs that are involved, as well as our commitment to equality with our residents. We have taken our concerns to our state legislators and have been fortunate enough to have personal contact with President Harmon, Speaker of the House Welch, Representative Rashid, and Senator Cervantes. And I am confident that they all understand our circumstances and have been assured that they are taking our concerns to heart. I will be meeting with them all in Springfield this month and hopefully report some positive funding news in the very near future. Thank you. That's all I have. Manager's report.
Just have one item this evening. I just wanted to remind residents that village offices are closed tomorrow for spring holiday.
Thank you. We move on to resident comments. Is there anyone in the public that would like to comment on non-agenda items this evening? Okay. Hearing none, we move on to the consent agenda. Clerk Sol.
Approve voucher list of bills, April 6th, 2023. Approve Village Board of Trustees regular meeting minutes, March 16th, 2023. Review and file Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting minutes, January 25th, 2023. Review and file Public Works February monthly report. A resolution authorizing the sale or disposal of personal property owned by the Village of Riverside. And a motion to approve an agreement between the Village of Riverside and Riverside Little League relative to the use and maintenance of Village of Riverside Parks and Recreation baseball fields.
Thank you, Ethan. Do any trustees or anybody in the public would like to have any of these things removed for further discussion? Hearing none, if I could ask for a motion and a second, please.
Motion made.
Motion by Trustee Gallegos, second.
Second.
Second by Trustee Marshazga. Mr. Sol.
Trustee Evans?
Aye.
Trustee Clarity?
Aye.
Trustee Marshazga. Trustee Hannan.
Aye.
Trustee Gallegos.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. We move on to the department boards and commission reports. Start with disc golf course update. Mr. Melchiotti.
Good evening, President Ballerine, Village Trustees, Manager Francis. Before you is the agenda history sheet and presentation for disc golf course proposed project. Much like pickleball, disc golf is a rapidly growing sport that we would like to introduce in Riverside. We are hoping that it will attract people to Riverside while offering more amenities to residents. It will encourage outdoor activity and showcase the natural scenery of Riverside along with the river. The Riverside Parks and Recreation Board was unanimously in favor of this project, with board member John McGlennon leading the initiative and preparing the material included in your packet. I've also been in contact with some local avid disc golfers, and they are excited about this potential project, including Zach Taylor, Berwyn Park District Commissioner, who is also a member of the Berwyn Disc Golf Club. The original project, as you can see, was 18 holes. We have drastically reduced that to 9, and those will be installed on Parks and Recreation land in between the Scout Cabin and Indian Gardens if approved. We will also stake out basket placement for viewing prior to installation.
Thank you. Any questions from anyone? Yes.
I guess, has there been feedback from the affected neighbors on this location?
No, they would be largely hidden. They wouldn't be near the street. But once we do the final placement, we're going to stake that out. We would certainly solicit that feedback from them.
Yeah, I think it just as a courtesy, it'd be helpful to let them know what the plan is. Notwithstanding the robust viewership we have at these meetings, it might be helpful to let them know that this is what they are and here's what's being planned. It'd be helpful to get their input. Obviously with being down from the Little League fields, they already have a lot of Saturday and Sunday traffic, but, it'd be nice to understand their views on these things.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay. Thank you, Ron. We'll move on to section B, discussion regarding park and playground signage.
Again, you have those information and those examples in front of you. This process began not only to designate our parks and the park names, but assist in enforcing general park and playground rules. We also wanted to reduce the number of signs in our parks and playgrounds. As you're aware, there's many individual signs that addressing different rules throughout the playgrounds. Obviously, this is part of our due diligence. We would obviously eliminate a lot of that signage, but this would also not only designate the park, but condense a lot of those rules into an aesthetic and setting signage consistent with our branding. Ultimately, visitors are subject to village ordinances, and since no signage will be able to encompass all areas of the village code, we are hoping that this will at least address the most common things that we get calls or feedback on. The signs are 48 by 36 inches. The posts will be powder coated black and will mimic the ones in Guthrie Park and in Centennial. And there's 3 types of verbiage, not to confuse, but there is verbiage specific to playgrounds, verbiage that will address athletic fields and courts for the areas that have those, and then ones that are just for parks. So I'm happy to answer any questions on those.
Questions?
I had, just for the record, I had sent an email over the last couple of days to Ron and to Jessica because I was concerned that with all of these multiple and disparate words or rules communicated in complete sentences all on top of each other, that it was rather overwhelming and dense, particularly to young readers or to people for whom English is a second language. And I was wondering if it's something that we could explore. There's a wonderful example of the Park District in Philadelphia that uses a pictorial icon system to convey an image that's almost universal with maybe 2 or 3 words in English below it, like supervise children or no smoking, to convey the meaning. And they can get on their signage like 16 separate and very disparate concepts communicated in a very elegant fashion. And I just didn't know if it was something that could be utilized in this instance so that it's not so much for the reader.
I did reach out, I did speak with village attorneys. There was 2 points that came up with the use of the icons. There was some worry that there's still the risk of ambiguity with just a picture, that it could possibly, aesthetically, it could end up being more cluttered because you're going to have the icon, you're going to need verbiage anyway. But the biggest challenge that I saw from our standpoint is a lot of these rules that we cover on the signage, I can't think of an icon that would cover them. Something like on Sundays, organized activities on our fields may not begin before noon. Like no smoking, some of them are fairly obvious. But I think it was not being able to address all of the rules with a corresponding icon, and the risk of ambiguity was the advice of legal counsel.
Well, Kristen?
Ms. Evans?
I agree with Trustee Marshaga that there are way too many words on these signs. I don't believe that we need all the rules on the signs. I wasn't aware that we had so many problems in the parks that we needed to put up signage. But I would like to take another look at the signage at the very least to try to tighten up the words so there's fewer. And also see if we can cut any of the rules. And I do want to explore possible symbolism for the rules. And if some of the text doesn't fit into the graphics, maybe we can reconsider including it. The reason why I just want to talk more about the logos or the icons. They fit in with our C4 priorities as part of our sustainability team. We have a place priority that plans for inclusion for everyone. If say if they don't speak Spanish, or if they have vision problems, or yes, we do need the children to be able to read the signs and follow the rules. I don't want to just throw a bunch of rules in plain text on a piece of metal and post it. I would like to see if we can do something, if we could elevate it a little bit.
Is that a volunteer request that you'd be happy to go over and
I
work
would,
with Ron?
yes, I offered
Perfect.
earlier, yes.
Okay, so Trustee Evans will make an appointment with you, and if, Aberdeen, if you want to be part of that, and see what we can do to clean it up just a tad.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Ron.
Yeah.
We'll move on to the Police Department Crime Status Update Report and Annual Report. Chief Buckley.
Good evening, President Ballerine, members of the Village Board, Manager Francis. Please accept a copy of the Riverside Police Department Annual Report. I have actually placed a copy of the report at each one of your tables for you to review. But I would like to start this evening by discussing some of our Part 1 reportable crimes in the Uniform Crime Report. These reportable crimes include homicide, criminal sexual assault, robbery, aggravated assault and battery, burglary, theft, motor vehicle theft, and arson. These are the ones that we're required to report under our UCR, or the Uniform Crime Report. In 2022, Riverside had 1 homicide to report, which happened to be a reckless homicide on First Avenue. It involved a vehicle crash. We had 1 armed robbery, which occurred at a gas station at Quincy and Harlem. There were 6 burglaries and 59 thefts, along with 2 motor vehicle thefts and 1 arson the arson which occurred on West Burlington. There were no criminal sexual assaults or aggravated assaults or batteries reported last year. As much as we try to keep every one of these categories at 0, here in Riverside, we do an excellent job preventing and deterring these types of crimes. I would also like to say that out of a lot of these crimes that you see reported here, a majority of them have been solved by our department. We made an arrest on the reckless homicide. We made an arrest on the arson, the burglary, as well as the armed robbery which occurred at the gas station. Are there any questions on the UCR at all?
Trustees?
On the UCR,
Just that part that I just went over. I'm going to go over the actual report now.
I have questions on the 2021 versus 2022 activity. Are we at that part?
I'll get to that, and then
Got
yes. So next, I would like to discuss the actual annual report that I provided to you for the police department. To start, as you can see from our organizational chart provided, the police department staffing is much better than it was at this time last year. Since that time, 2 officers were hired and sent to the police academy. They completed their field training program and are now actually out working the streets. There is currently 1 new police officer in the police academy and 1 who's actually in the FTO program, the field training program, right now. Our plan is to hire 2 additional officers who would start the police academy in May in preparation for a retirement. This is necessary due to the amount of time it takes to train an officer and to get them through the police academy and the field training program and capable of working patrol duties. Next in there, you'll see our crisis intervention training, or CIT, trained officers. This has been a goal of mine since I started here. Having officers trained and capable of handling incidents involving mental health crisis is paramount to everything we do on a daily basis. Currently, every one of the police officers here in Riverside, except for 1, is trained in CIT. That officer will be attending class very soon. These classes are actually very difficult to get into and they're very expensive. But here at Riverside, we have had an excellent opportunity to have these classes presented and funded by the Riverside Township Mental Health Board. I cannot thank them enough for everything they have done to help us become one of the leaders in this field in our area by having almost the entire department trained, as CIT is very important, and having them fund this and supply the training has been a tremendous help to our department and to the village. The Riverside Police Department participates in many community activities, and our officers enjoy meeting and talking with residents, although our main priority is to provide for the safety and security at these gatherings. As I discussed earlier about the Part 1 crimes and the UCR crimes, the Riverside Police Department has been very successful with apprehending offenders who have committed these crimes. We have made arrests in several of those categories. As you can see, our calls for service and activity in many areas has increased in 2022. Due to COVID-19, the numbers in 2021 were down, but they have steadily increased in 2022, and these numbers will continue to increase in 2023. At this time, I would like to thank the men and women of the Riverside Police Department for the work, for their tireless work every day and every night for making Riverside a safe and welcoming community. I would also like to thank you, the members of the Village Board and Village Manager Francis, for getting us the best employees, equipment, and training so that we are able to serve our community properly. At this time, I would be open to any questions that you may have. I know I briefed through the report pretty quickly. I would hope that you would take some time, doesn't have to be tonight, to look through it a little bit, but I am open to any questions right now if you do have any.
You answered my question. I just wanted to make sure that anybody looking at the statistics year over year in isolation, it's clear to notice that the numbers have gone up, but you answered the question. That's a result of activity during COVID.
It is, and you can see on some of the areas that it has gone up. One is our school checks. We do school checks morning, afternoon, and throughout the day. So it's not just a one-time thing. Our goal is to be out there constantly and making sure everything's good at our schools.
Yep.
Can you explain what a school check is, please? Sorry.
So in the morning, we're there while school's letting in and letting out. We're helping with directing traffic. And it's not just doing one specific thing, it's doing multiple things at once. It's looking at what's going on, looking for anything that may be suspicious. But also throughout the day, we go and we check doors, making sure doors are secured and locked. We'll check in with the principals, make sure everything is fine. The people we really check in with are the people that work the front desk to see, what's been going on in the school today, anything that we need to know about, or the custodial staff. We'll talk to them to see how things are going with repairing different things throughout the school, windows, doors, things like that. So it's multifaceted of what we do at the schools. We've had a great working relationship with all of our schools, and we will definitely continue that.
Thank you.
I was just going to comment that the presence at the schools is notable, I'm in front of one of the schools every day, and we see officers there every day. There's a notable increase in community engagement at that time, and so I appreciate the effort of your staff to that.
We were just talking to an officer today. He loves getting high fives from all the kids as they're walking by, so,
And the kids love it.
yes.
Ms. Evans?
I saw in the report that there were 47 tickets, or 47 juveniles were cited. Do you keep, and I know that at times the students, especially at RB, are ticketed, right? Do you have any aggregated data? Do you have any data in aggregate, and do you have any breakdowns of who is getting ticketed?
I do. I don't have that with me. I can get that for you, but it's not all at the high school. It's for throughout the entire village for multiple different offenses and things that take place. Our goal is not to go out there and ticket everybody. We try to work with people as best we can, but when it gets to that level or that point that citation is necessary, then that's what we do.
Any questions? Any other questions for Chief? I just have a couple of observations, and as one is I'd like to recognize Cheryl Lara for her 20 years of service. She's been here a long time, and I know she's very important to the department. She will be missed, so I hope her retirement is wonderful. And secondly, on page 12, you'll notice Trustee Clarity's picture right in the center with her family. So I have had some extra brochures, so if anybody in the crowd would like to get Megan's autograph after the meeting, feel free.
I'd like to compliment you on choosing the most attractive families in Riverside.
Well, my closing for this now is that the person who did choose that photo is Pam McCall, who is our administrative assistant. She puts this together with input from the entire department. Pam will be retiring May 3rd after 27 years here at Riverside. So this will be her final annual report for us, but the report will continue with her predecessor and make sure that everything is done just as well as what Pam's been doing for 27 years.
Thank you, Chief. Okay. Are there any other reports this evening?
I do have one on behalf of the LAC. It will be quick, but it is important. I think you'll all enjoy this. This month, they are having and sponsoring an invasive trade-in program. And that is where households can take pictures of them removing invasive species like buckthorn and others, and send them in with an application by April 21st to the LAC, and receive an actual native plant like a pagoda dogwood or a river birch or a white swamp oak in 5-gallon sizes. So it is one per household while supplies last. So I encourage the entire community to take advantage of this wonderful program and get those invasives out of your yard and get something nice in there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there any other reports this evening? Okay, hearing none, we move on to pending business. We have one thing on our agenda tonight, the resolution revising the policy for village sponsors or support for special events. Clerk Soul.
Good evening. Staff seeks to just make some quick updates to our special event policy and application process. We're incorporating some recommendations from our insurer, the Intergovernmental Risk Management Agency regarding risk transfer and hold harmless provisions. We're also incorporating some standards from the recently approved ordinance on temporary event tents, and we're also including some language on inflatables.
Thank you. Any questions for Ethan? Hearing none, if I can have a motion and a second?
Motion made.
Motion by trustee Gallego, second.
Second.
Second by trustee Marshaga. Mr. Sol, if you could.
Trustee Evans.
Aye.
Trustee Pollock.
Aye.
Trustee Clarity.
Aye.
Trustee Marshazga.
Aye.
Trustee Hannan.
Aye.
Trustee Galagos.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Move on to new business this evening. We have several items. Discussion regarding the Quincy Community Center projects. Director Melchiotti.
Good evening. These projects were planned and budgeted for in our capital project budget as Phase 2 of the renovations at the Quincy Community Center building. These projects can be broken down into two parts: replacement of the front windows with any necessary tuck pointing, and a front awning or signage to enhance the appearance of the building and designate it as a village facility so it's easily identifiable to visitors or those passing by. Quotes, renderings, and information were included in the agenda history packet, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Evans.
So it says the awning can be in any approved color consistent with our branding, including the Parks and Rec logo and address. So I was wondering if we could maybe turn it, make it green.
Absolutely.
And I think Joe had an idea about the name.
Okay.
I think you wanted to go with Quincy Street Community Center for branding purposes, Milan Grant, Quincy. Also,
She took my thunder.
sorry. Also, I think it would be nicer if we took the address off the awning and just put some numbers on the building. And finally, it would be great if we could incorporate either the Parks and Rec logo or the Village logo. We could either have it printed on maybe the center window or on the building somewhere.
I did consult with the village planner. So our original idea was to incorporate the logo on the awning, which is impossible due to the sign code. The lettering, we can adjust as needed. But we did discuss some options as far as putting signage. There's actually 4 windows on the building, so putting signage in between those middle windows. We can affix something there. That can be affixed signage, that could be painted on the building, but we could certainly add it there, as well as the wall that faces the parking lot that's off the street.
Yeah, because there's it's difficult for anyone to see that it's a municipal building. So I think the logo on the Quincy side would be helpful and look nice.
Any other questions? Ms. Clarity?
I'll just reiterate, I think if part of the problem we're trying to solve is community awareness of what the building is, my understanding or belief is that many in the community aren't going to understand that the Quincy Community Center is part of Riverside Parks. And so understand, it sounds like putting a logo on the sign or on the awning is impossible, but to the extent we can put Riverside Park somewhere or the logo, I think that's important because that's what's going to cue people in. That's where you register for soccer, right? I think there's a gap here in understanding of what the Quincy Community Center is.
Agreed. Yep.
Okay. Doug, did you want to talk?
I think Aberdeen.
Go ahead, Aberdeen.
I agree with both trustee Evans and trustee Clarity. And as far as placement of an additional sign or logo on the building itself, I would not want to see it on the windows, given that there are 4 facing Quincy, and there isn't a real centered way to place it there. And given the placement of the historic-looking lamppost on that would be the east side, I would suggest that the greater expanse of brick on the west side of the windows and awning might be a nice place to center logo signage.
So to the right?
On the Quincy side.
The
Yeah,
right of
to
the
the right.
awning?
To the right, yeah. And then, of course, on the parking lot side, you could put corresponding signage so that visitors, once they're in there, could see it as they approach the entrance of the building.
Mr. Pollak?
Thank you. My biggest want, or my biggest priority for this building is to get clear windows on the Quincy Street side, so that it shows transparency to the public, and it will greatly enhance the appearance of the building. Instead of looking like an industrial building, it'll look like a proper commercial storefront to match what we want in downtown Riverside. On top of that, I believe our code requires it to be clear windows. If not required, at least encourages that. But I definitely would like to see clear windows. Now, this discussion made me think of something else, too. Have we considered a blade sign similar to next door?
We originally did. The problem is our logo, either the Parks and Recreation logo, certainly because it juts out, but even the village logo is not a perfect circle. It wouldn't fit. That was going to be our
Okay.
first option.
As long as I get my
Yeah.
clear windows, I'm happy.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Was there any kind of consensus as far as placement of the signage or the windows, just so I can move forward?
I think I would agree with trustee Marshaga, and is that on the far,
Okay.
the opposite side would be the placement. I agree with Doug 100% that, clear windows with shades would be beneficial. And does everybody agree with that? I'm just trying to summarize everything,
I
okay?
have a list, if I can just go through it really quick,
Okay,
if that works.
green,
It's going to be, the wording of the building will be Quincy Street Community Center, green awning, address numbers on the building, incorporate the logo to ensure awareness that is Parks and Recreation building, and that will be on the right side of the awning if you're facing the building. Parking lot side, add signage to incorporate logo, windows clear. For safety purposes, we'll have to make sure that they're,
Tempered, yes.
thank you. And then I think I had logo on the Quincy side of the building, which I kind of already reiterated, so.
does that sound good to everybody?
Perfect.
Any dissenters? Hearing none. Oh, and the color. Did you say color? Did you?
Green.
Green,
Yes.
okay.
And then also, just so from a staff perspective, we'll make sure that some type of blinds are installed, so then if you have classes going on for privacy purposes, we'll be able to,
Pull them down.
lower them.
Okay.
Correct.
Those will be on these windows or the windows on the community room on the inside?
It would be, well, I would say it would be on all four windows, but the ones where staff's sitting, as long as you can't see their computers or what they're working on from the street side, I would assume that they would be open for the most part, when we're open especially. And then when the room is being utilized, if it's, for example, it's a public event, and so we want people to see in and know, come on in, those will be open. But if there are certain classes going on, I'll use an example, women's yoga, I think we probably want those pulled down. Or if there's different classes with kiddos, depending on what they're doing, I guess. Because that was some of the feedback that from Parks and Rec Board, correct me if I'm
Yes.
wrong, that the privacy piece, if there's classes going on, and being sensitive to that.
No, that makes sense. I'm just thinking you can, if I remember the space correctly, right, there's windows on that interior room where those yoga classes would take place. That's
Correct.
glass.
2, yes.
I mean, you could put, I don't feel strongly, but you could put window coverings on that space, but still allow these to be open. I think, in my opinion, allowing these to be open and viewing into the building as much as possible is probably to our advantage, rather than in practical effect, if you have blinds, they get shut and people may forget to open them.
Are you talking about, because there's the two windows that are closer, the right side are where that room
How
is.
does that room touch those?
Yeah.
That makes sense. Understood.
So the other two, though, that is the space where visitors come and staff are
Yeah.
at, would be open.
I think that's my point. To the extent you can make it as welcoming as possible. This is a little bit outside of our, core downtown core area, and sometimes you come to the building and the signage will help a lot, but it looks it's unclear. Is it open? Is this the Parks and Rec building? So to the extent you can have the windows, that are at that front desk space unimpeded as much as possible, I think suits our purposes.
And hours of operation, too, to make it very clear to visitors.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that input. Very good.
Thank you very
Ron.
much.
Go on to our second, an ordinance approving a variation from section 10-7-3 accessory structures and uses to build a deck on the second story of a residence and denying a variation for section 10-7-4 permitted encroaches to the Village of Riverside zoning ordinance to build a first-story deck that encroaches 5 feet into the street yard at 95 Groveland. Planner Siren.
Good evening. Mr. Cirillo, who's here with us tonight, is the owner of 95 Groveland Avenue. The property is a single-family home facing the Des Plaines River. The variation request has to do with the front of the house. So it's a two-story house with the second story set back slightly. Currently, there is no set of stairs and landing on the front of the house. When Mr. Cirillo was doing some utility line trenching, he discovered that those stairs were structurally unsound and removed the stairs for safety. The zoning code would allow him to put in stairs and a landing that are compliant with the building code with no variation required. So he could replace the stairs. What he'd like to do is build a deck on the front of the house. The zoning code specifies that, and just as a note, a deck is differentiated from a porch by the lack of having a roof. Once you put a roof on it, it would be considered a porch, effectively. Regardless of whether it's a deck or a porch, any kind of encroachment in the area between the house and the street would require a variation. So Mr. Cirillo is seeking a variation to have the deck. The deck would encroach 5 feet from the front of the house towards the street. So the house is set back a little less than 20 feet from the street. So there'd be a 5-foot encroachment of the deck and then stairs from the deck down to the street. So Mr. Cirillo stated that his property is located at the lowest point in Groveland Avenue and therefore is vulnerable to the effects of floodwater. The proposed deck will be set on piers, which would prevent it from shifting floodwaters or during more frequent saturations of the yard during storms. The Planning and Zoning Commission discussion included the fact that while it is a hardship for a property to be in the floodplain, there wasn't a direct relationship between that hardship and the need for a deck. So the PZC voted 4-1 to recommend denial of that request. The second variation request was to do with building what I'm going to call a deck-like structure on the second story of the house. That second story is set back slightly, so the proposed deck would be within the footprint of the first story. So on the roof of the first story would be the deck. It would be, again, open air. The zoning code doesn't exactly define this type of structure. There was a list of definitions in the staff memo. The closest that we could find was a deck. But the zoning code does actually restrict decks from being no higher than the first floor elevation of the house. And that's why the variation was sought. The Planning and Zoning Commissioners found that the zoning ordinance doesn't accurately define the type of structure being requested. Because the structure doesn't strictly meet the definition of a deck, it's not a raised platform, it's not a porch or a balcony. The Commissioners found that the lack of an accurate definition in the planning, in the zoning ordinance created the hardship. And they recommended, they voted 3-2 to recommend approval of the variation. And just a note on that vote, the recommendation of approval is not technically a favorable recommendation under state law because it received 3 favorable votes when 4 favorable votes are required for a favorable recommendation. So approval of that variation request requires 4 trustees to vote in favor of it, with the village president not voting. And again, that's for the second story deck-like structure. And a couple of notes, after the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, staff received additional information from the village's former community development director. She said that she had interpreted second-story decks that are within the footprint of and supported by the first story of the house, like this one, to be a different type of structure that was not subject to the standards for decks in the zoning ordinance. So if the board supports this determination, staff will use it when reviewing future building permit applications for similar structures. And if the board supports clarifying the zoning ordinance on this point, staff recommends incorporating that change into a future set of zoning ordinance amendments. So the ordinance in your agenda follows the commission's recommendations to deny the variation for the deck in the street yard and to approve the variation for the second-story deck.
Thank you. Mr. Cirillo, would you like to speak?
I'd like to say thank you for allowing me to speak today on what I have proposed at my house. I'll keep it brief. I would like to state right off the bat that Ann, Ashley, and many of the other people I've talked to throughout my entire process of working on my house have been absolutely phenomenal. It's my first time going through a lot of this, so I asked a lot of questions and probably really annoyed them through it all, but they were great. So I'll keep it brief. I've lived in Riverside since 2017. We've lived on Groveland Avenue the entire time. We love our block. We love our community. I plan on growing my family here for many, many years to come. I own a business. I have an aquatic design company. I've done numerous amount of projects here already in Riverside. I'm extremely proud of that. The most recent one that I've been proud of is the Coonley House, which we actually restored the mirror pond there into a natural swimming pool. That was not only just the Village of Riverside needing to be okay with it, but the Frank Lloyd Wright Society, so it was a lot of fun going through that whole process. So this project, for me, I am very appreciative of the Zoning and Planning Committee understanding my need for the top portion and why that would be allowed, but I would still like to just go a little further on the lower portion that I would like you guys to consider for me today. After knowing I could give you guys more information, I decided not to do that and just want to speak from my street and my house in particular. My neighbors next to me have experienced the 2013 flood that I know many of you know about and have talked about in this village. I've gotten involved in the meetings that were early on about Groveland and the rivers and everything that happens on our block. I am trying to make my property as not susceptible to what can potentially happen again, and I'm excited that the village is talking about improving on that river area to help my property. In the meantime, I'm taking all my utilities out of my basement, I'm putting them and investing in it on the first floor. I'm losing livable space because of my hardship of not being able to utilize a basement in the real way as well. So I'm trying to take advantage as much as livable space, and I see a porch as livable space on the first floor because realistically my basement isn't in a position, and I'm doing work to do that. Lastly, for me and what I'm trying to do, my original steps and the sidewalls of my steps, if you see a photo of my house before I had to take out the stairs, were 5 feet. So there was a structure on the sides of my steps that technically weren't to code, because you'd walk up and be standing on the step to open my door, which wasn't good. We always knew we had to replace it. So, however, the porch would be in that 5 feet that the sidewalls and my steps were already visiting in. There's 6 out of 10 other homes on my street that have porches as well, and there's 8 out of those 10 that have a setback to the street that's much closer than mine, if I'm saying that correctly. So after taking all these things into consideration, I hope you do as well. I very much look forward to spending a lot more money on improving my house. That's going to be, utilized hopefully well here in the village. So thank you again for your time, and I look forward to hearing what you guys think.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Any questions or comments from the trustees? I would, well, go ahead, Doug. I'm sorry.
I'd like to, thank you. I'd like to focus on the first, what I'll call the first variation first, and, which is the second-story balcony or deck. From what, correct me if I'm wrong, Planner Siren, but I believe you said that previous interpretations under the previous director reportedly would have allowed that without a variation. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So I look to the village attorney, I guess. Can we go back to that? Because I agree with that, what the application should be, what I'm pretty confident we all want it to be, is that they could do that. They could do that second floor balcony or deck.
That's right.
I would much rather allow that than to grant a variation that is questionable at best. I mean, technically, the Plan Commission did not recommend that variation, if I'm correct.
Correct. It
Attorney
didn't meet the state standard for a positive recommendation,
Right.
even though it
Even
was
though it's
more
3
in
to
favor
2,
than against, right?
It's not really a positive
Correct.
recommendation. If we can just go back to the previous interpretation and rely on that, then the applicant can just withdraw that variation and we're done. I
So-
would, and I talked to Planner Siren about that today, we will go back, and staff will fix and clarify and make sure it's clear for future references.
Yeah, so the operative principle there is that an agency and a unit of local government is an agency, has discretion to interpret its own code and rules. And the courts actually are to give deference to that interpretation where there's ambiguity and where an interpretation is made. In my mind, the better view is to go back, is what my advice would be. Whenever you have an interpretation with someone who's saying, I always say this, say, I'm not sure how to interpret this, this is what I think. My first question is there a history of how it's been interpreted in the past? And if there is, I always say, unless it's outlandishly wrong, that is really the better way, and that, because what you're doing, you're sort of changing the rules when they've been interpreted. If there's a history, the best approach to my way of thinking is to do an amendment if you want to interpret it differently, to clarify it so that it's obvious. But I would say that that's the better approach, because there's a history, if there's a history.
Okay. If we wanted to take that approach, it would no longer be a motion to accept the variance. It would
Correct.
be a motion to,
It would be a motion to accept the interpretation, the historical interpretation of this same language that Ann has discovered, and to give direction for that interpretation to stand to Ann.
okay. If there's any, yes, Mr. Hannon.
Just to support trustee Pollack, I was on the Planning and Zoning Commission at the time. We spent an exhaustive amount of time trying to debate what's a porch, what's not a porch, and would agree with the finding of the former person, like, since I forget the title, that was my understanding of what we had. So if this is something we can resolve tonight by just adding clarity that this does not require a variation based on the historic reading of the statute, I'd prefer to go that route.
So if I can ask, can I divide these two out and have a motion and a second on that particular thing, and then we'll move on to the second variation?
Yes, you may.
Would you like to make that motion?
I'll make the motion that we rely on the
Approve
historical
the historical.
interpretation, which means they don't need a variation for that
Correct.
second floor.
And
balcony
direct the
slash-
zoning administrator to follow that, until the language is changed, if it is.
And I would add to that, and to direct staff to consider what amendments may be necessary to make that more clear in the future.
In a second?
I'll second.
Second by trustee Evans. Any further discussion? Mr. Hannon?
I just want to make sure I understand correctly. If we vote in favor of trustee Pollack's motion, we're voting in favor of the second floor deck
Correct.
going forward?
Yes, going forward as of right.
As of right,
Not
not
as a
as a
variation. It would be entitled to a building permit that otherwise met all the requirements.
Okay. Any other comments? Hearing none, Ethan, if you'd please call the roll.
Trustee Evans.
Aye.
Trustee Pollack.
Aye.
Trustee Clarity.
Aye.
Trustee Marshazga.
Aye.
Trustee Hannan.
Aye.
Trustee Galagos.
Aye.
Motion passes. So now we will move on to the second variation that was denied. And is there any further clarity that anyone needs? Mr. Pollack?
No further clarity. I have comments if
Okay.
appropriate. This one's a lot tougher. I can understand that we do encourage front porches. That's something that historically the village has encouraged. I'm in agreement with that policy. But on the other hand, I don't really see anything unique about this property that can only be resolved by granting a front yard setback variation. They can have safe and adequate access to the house without a variation. Again, I completely understand the desire to have that living space, that deck. That could be done in the back probably without a variation. And as sympathetic as I am to the plan, I just don't see any way to grant a variation because I don't see how that's unique or how the variation would resolve any kind of hardship.
Any other questions or any other observations?
Well, I would just say that the very function of a deck or a porch is to have outdoor engagement, social gatherings of neighbors, the very purpose that we have principles in our village here. And I would say that form follows function in this case, and I would be in favor of granting the variance for that.
I would like to, is there any other comments before I make my comments? Okay, I would like us to think about one other thing. I agree with Mr. Pollack that you're going to have a hard time with a hardship. But I watched the planning and zoning meeting. They struggled with this. And I would like us to consider a text amendment, at least send this back down to the planning and zoning for them to look at that. Because this text amendment would further the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan or the planning documents. When we spent all the time discussing front porches, and Trustee Gallego said it very nicely, we wanted a community. And I really believe that Groveland, Lincoln, Kimbark, I could take Forest and Parkland or Park and West and throw it in there. Those properties were not part of the regular plan, so they are unique. Those properties are also grid style. Which is again very unique. The lots are narrower. They don't have the curvature. And if I drove by your house several times, so you saw my black Subaru, that wasn't me stalking you. And if you took a string and put it on the gentleman on the corner of Park Place in Groveland and ran it down to the other side, he wouldn't be incurring any more front yard than anyone else is. So I get the fact that it's not a hardship, but I do think it's a very unique circumstance that is very unique to this area.
For Wesencraft's addition?
I'm sorry?
For Wesencraft's addition to the
Yeah.
Riverside, is that the, okay.
That whole area, because of the way it's built, and I think a text amendment would keep it to that area, and I think that area would do very well. And if you drive those streets, Kimbark, Lincoln, and Forest, every house almost has a front porch. So it's very community orientated, that area. So I'd like us to consider sending it back to PZC for a text amendment. I don't know all the technical terms about a zoning overlay or whatever.
Oh,
needs
how
be
to
done.
do it? Well,
Yeah.
you don't need to be that specific when you send it back, that we could work with P&Z to do the appropriate procedure, like the appropriate way. I don't think it would be an overlay necessarily. It would be a section that had different rules based on its, as you put it, unique characteristics compared with the other areas of the village.
So what I would ask is a motion to deny the variation, but in turn, send it to BZC as a possible text amendment. Am I correct in saying that?
That would be appropriate. That's a two-parter, but that's, if someone wants to make that motion, that's perfectly okay to vote on it that way.
I will make that motion.
Okay.
But do we have to do both?
No.
Yeah, see, I would rather that it come back to us later on as a variance if we don't agree with the findings of P&Z. That way we have more flexibility.
Sorry, go ahead, Mr.
No, I was just going to say, so it's two things you're doing in the motion. One is denying the variation and then sending it back. Now, as a trustee, if you want to send it back, but you want to vote in favor of the variation, you have a right to ask that they be separated, if that's what you're getting
Yeah, I
at.
would like to have a later date discussion on that, if we can find more of a discussion at P&Z.
I don't think he wants to close the door on the variation,
Yeah.
in case the text amendment doesn't.
Well, then there would have to be a motion to continue the variation to a date certain.
Specific date.
And then that it would have to get a majority of the trustees in favor of it.
We have a motion and a
Okay, so
second.
we have-
Yeah, so it needs, yeah, so.
I understand Trustee Gallagher's if I'm understanding correctly, you want to vote to approve this one way or another, right?
Well, I don't,
If
not
that-
necessarily, but I would like to
Okay.
hear more of a discussion from P and Z and see
I
what
would like to
discussion they have.
withdraw my motion and make a different motion.
Okay?
Does the second have to?
I withdraw my
Second.
Okay. So now I'd like to make a motion simply approving the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation to deny the variation, period. Then
I will second that.
I will make another motion regarding the remand.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ethan, if you'd please call the roll.
Trustee Evans.
Aye.
Trustee Pollock.
Aye.
Trustee Clarity.
Aye.
Trustee Marshazga. Trustee Hannan. Trustee Gallagher.
Nay.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Pollock?
I would like to make a motion directing the Planning and Zoning Commission to consider amendments to the zoning ordinance for this particular zoning district. This is an R4 district? R3 district, that would look at the options for allowing greater flexibility in putting in front yard porches or decks, or I'm not sure what the language should be.
Yeah, greater
that good
flexibility,
enough?
encroachment, greater encroachment, but you may want to make it broader than that.
Yeah, and if, so that's the motion, but I want to make it clear to Planning and Zoning Commission, I'm not directing them to approve anything. They're just simply going to look at it for us and come back and give us their thoughts on it.
Okay. If I can make just a clerical point, the R3 district is more encompassing than just this area. So do you want to shrink it to just this area, just the I shouldn't say unincorporated, but the
You know, maybe we should make it even broader and just say, have the Planning and Zoning Commission, in light of this request, look at the regulations for front yard porches and decks. And if they want it, they can then tell us whether they think it should be restricted to the R3, whether there should be an overlay district, or how they think best to approach that.
Okay.
So does that constitute a new motion?
Yes, it's
Okay.
basically, yes,
So
it
that-
satisfies the
That
criteria.
part's my motion.
Okay. Do we have a second for that? Second. Motion by Trustee Pollock, second by Trustee Marshazga. Any further comments? Yes, Mr. Hannan.
Can I attempt to amend that motion?
We have a motion and a second. You could,
You could make a motion to amend.
we could make a motion.
I'll make a motion to amend. After having said, again, on PZZ, I think the more direction and specific direction we can give them is beneficial. And I'd like to amend that motion to limit it to the portion of the streets on the grid that were originally outside of the Olmsted plan, so we can get specific direction. Obviously, at a later date, we can ask for further guidance, but to have a revisiting of the porch plan, I think, is too big a bite to send back and get a meaningful response to what we're looking for tonight. So my amendment would be to amend Trustee Pollock's, but to limit the request to the number of streets that were not in the original plan as described by President Valerie.
Is that acceptable to you?
I'll second that motion, if I can.
You can, that's fine.
Okay. Any further comments? Sorry that you have to continue this a little more, but I think.
Can I just get
Sure.
clarification on that then? So where am I at in this entire, it was a very interesting
so-
thing that just
yeah,
happened.
so-
You're going to, yeah, basically, you're going to another PZC meeting.
Yeah, so right,
With your recommendations to them to reconsider it, is that? what I'm
no,
hearing?
no, so what happened, sir, is your variation request was denied.
Okay.
But the village board has been discussing a possible text amendment that would change the general rules for a limited area of the village that includes your property.
Okay.
And
So-
those area, and specifically to look at the front porch issue because of the way these lots are configured and their size and their setback status in these particular areas. And possibly, one possible outcome of that, and Village President Ballerine indicated, was suggesting that what they might want to do is make the rules more flexible for your area, so you might end up ultimately being able to do what you want to do or something similar, but we don't know, and the board isn't telling the P and Z what to do. It's asking the P and Z to consider and bring a recommendation back.
Thank you. And so I would need a variation if they approved you, or they approved or rechanged?
No. So the difference between a text amendment and a variation is, here are the rules for this area where your property is, and you can't do what you want to do.
Right.
So if you show unique circumstances to your property and yours alone, basically, you can get almost like a zoning reprieve, but just for your lot,
Yeah.
okay? A text amendment applies wherever it applies to, and if those rules would change, you would need any more relief if the text amendment were adopted by the board, and you could go get a building permit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Ethan, if you please call the roll.
Trustee Evans.
Aye.
Trustee Pollock.
Aye.
Trustee Clarity.
Aye.
Trustee Marshazga.
Aye.
Trustee Hannan.
Aye.
Trustee Gallegos.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Schroeder.
Thank you again.
We move on to an ordinance approving certain variations related to the redevelopment of the parking and rear play area at Central Houses School at 61 Woodside, Riverside, District 96. Planner Siren.
Thank you. This application includes 9 requests for variations. The requests are summarized on page 4 of the memo, which is page 205 in your agenda packet. Following a public hearing on March 22nd, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted 4-0 to recommend approval of the requested variations with 3 conditions. The first is that the sidewalk remains in the same location as was shown on a page in the agenda packet for the PZC. The second is that the baseball backstop be not any further west or north than its current location, that was closer to the residences. And the third condition is that the fence along Akenside Road be located as shown on a page in the packet. The conditions of that approval are met in the revised variation materials that are in attachment C. Specifically, if you look at page 224 in the online agenda, which is a site plan listing the required variations and showing them on the site plan, you'll see the sidewalk and fence are in the same location as required by the PZC, and the existing and proposed locations of the backstop are also shown on that plan. The proposed location of the backstop is further east and south than its current location, which meets the condition that the PZC recommended. As a special use in a residential district, the central Hauser site plan also requires review and approval by the PZC. The commission initially reviewed a conceptual plan on January 25th. The March 22nd PZC meeting agenda included a review of the site plan, but the commission continued the application until the April 26th meeting, citing the need for consistent site plans and additional information. So a review of the site plan at the PZC will include site lighting, impervious surfaces, and stormwater management, landscaping, emergency access, and other issues related to public safety, and all the other zoning requirements in the zoning ordinance. And the applicant is here tonight to give a presentation and answer your questions.
Gentlemen?
Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Ryan Kelly. I'm with DLA Architects. We're the architects of record for the Riverside School District. I think you'll see on page 224 that the site plan really has a few different goals. The district has long been looking at their schools and finding a way to safely separate parking and play, and this plan achieves that. It creates a pickup and drop-off area at the eastern side of the school, also delineated parking in a safe manner that's separate from play. We think that the drop-off is going to help alleviate some of the congestion that often is experienced on Woodside during pickup and drop-off at both Hauser Junior High School and Central Elementary School. This plan also includes a renovated recreation field. As of last night, the school board decided, we had a long discussion within the school board as well as the community on the differences and the benefits of grass versus turf, synthetic turf. The school board has decided to go with natural grass. So we'll be looking to develop those drawings into engineering so we can submit those to the village and then to the MWRD. That'll be key to the approval of these variances. That process with the MWRD and this in this site would be pretty extensive. So it's about a 6 to 8 month process for review after the village. And then we hope to build in spring of '24. So your approval and your input is key to our process and our schedule. The site plan also includes a playground that's focused on Central Elementary. That surfacing would be an engineered wood fiber playground. So that's something that we've done at the other schools, and it's been viewed by the MWRD as well as the village as not completely pervious, but more pervious than for instance, a poured rubber surface. I think that the other elements that we've talked with, we worked along with the Department of Public Safety as well as the village arborist to get their input on access in and around the school. So, that's something that I think that we've provided both on the Hauser side, which is important because we will be cutting off an access lane that exists currently. We feel that is for safety as well. Oftentimes vehicles come through that site, and so creating a safe pedestrian pathway around the building is something that's key to that plan. Many times students and bikers come from the east and the neighborhoods east of Central and Hauser, and so creating safe passageway into and through the site is an important part of this plan. I think that in talking with the village arborist, hearing from community members, obviously landscaping is important to the village. We've looked at that. Our landscape architect is working with the village arborist to make sure that all the native plantings that we're providing are in keeping with the nuances that the village is looking for. We also are creating some screening along Aikenside to further sort of separate that more commercial property from the residential district to the east. So we are requesting 5 variations. One would be for the trash enclosure to encroach about 45 feet, I believe, into the street yard. The hardship that we really encounter with this property is that it essentially has 2 street yards. We've got the front side where pickup and drop-off happens at the front of the school, and then the rear of the schools that also becomes a street yard. So any redevelopment that we do and improvements there would be considered, most certainly in the street yard. So the trash enclosure does not exist today. It's set a little bit further back from the Aikenside Street. So this is as close as we can get it to the school and remove it from the street. And again, it would be a masonry enclosure that would be sympathetic to the existing building. The second variation that we're asking for is a reduction of off-street parking. Currently, they have 77 parking spaces. We're able to increase that by 10. It does work well for both schools now. 114 parking spaces are required by village ordinance. Here again, we're balancing the need for giving more play space as a benefit to the students, also the community, and then providing enough parking that is necessary for the school to function. So we feel that this plan does that. We are looking at a variation for reduced medians within the parking lot. We have, after input from planning and zoning, we have actually combined some of the medians that we were providing. We feel that gives more landscape for a shade tree to prosper rather than an 144 square foot median. So that's something that we're looking for, a reduction from the 17 that's required to 12. So it's a reduction of about 720 square feet that we're asking for there. One thing that is important to the school in this recreation field is protecting the kids from the parking lot, as I mentioned before, but also Aikenside. And so we're asking for a variation for fencing running perpendicular to Aikenside and then parallel to it as well, essentially parallel. So that would be a 4-foot fence in keeping with village standards. That would be a wrought iron style fence, and that would effectively keep kids, from running into the parking lot, running into the street, chasing the ball, and keep balls, for the most part, hopefully out of both the parking lot and the street. Lastly, a slight reduction in the width of the perimeter landscaping. buffer at the street. Because the property line is, really follows the street and dips in, it encumbers us a little bit on the amount of green space that we're able to provide. We are providing more green space beyond that property line to the sidewalk, but technically it would be a variation that you'd have to consider. Beyond that, I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's what we've talked about to this point.
Okay. Before we take questions, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak? Okay. Hearing none, are there any questions from any of the trustees? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am, please.
Gail McKernan, 146 Akenside Road. I attended the planning and zoning meeting along with some of the neighbors, and I think at least the immediate neighbors, we're fine with, most everything the school wants to do, but our concern is with the 4-foot fence and we're losing that buffer landscape, because right now, we have the lilac bushes that run from 20 to 25 feet deep, and it's a very good landscape buffer. And now we're going down to anywhere between, 5 and 10 feet? I believe on the plan.
I think it shows 10 feet, 10 inches to 21 feet, 10 inches, correct?
Right, in some spaces, but right now we have 20 to 25 feet of landscape buffer. So I think that's our only concern, that we don't want to see this fence, that it would be, and if we could get any more buffer space, that would be great, if we could move that fence 5 feet back in. I think we know that we're going to have the fence. That's going to be a given. But if there's any way we could help with landscaping, maybe getting a little bit more space in there. I mean, I don't think it would be a hardship for the school to give up 5 more feet in that whole park.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Where's the landscape?
Landscape plan is,
I see it on, yeah. On that page 227, okay, in my, all right, I'm looking at page 227. You're still
Yes.
showing that other backstop? Is that gone?
So that was shown as a request for planning and zoning to show the existing backstop and then where we were moving the new one, to show that we were not moving it any closer to the property line, essentially to the neighbor's house. So that was really a diagram that was requested by planning and zoning. So that's why that was included.
Okay.
What I will say is that on page, sorry, bear with me. Landscape pages, yeah, page 224, I believe. We are providing new plantings, and our landscape architect is here. I can speak specifically to the varieties, new lilac bushes that would be healthier and have more long-term growth than what is there now. Also a variety of other plantings that would really make that fence go away. So our intent is to buffer and to shield that. I think the lilacs now, and I think it's some lilacs and some other bushes, have a time where they offer screening, and then at other times it's very wooded and does not. But we're hoping to improve that condition and certainly not worsen it and screen that new fence.
Okay. Anything else from the public? Okay, hearing none. Any trustees, any comments, questions? And before we do it, Lance,
I have a question.
Wait, just give me just a second.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Alex. Trustee Gallegos. If you could please explain to us the standards of a school district versus, because they're different than the standards of a residential district when they come for variations, and I think that'd be helpful to the trustees.
So the history of schools and other units of local government that exist within municipalities when they want to do something to their property has a long and sometimes conflicted history. But be that as it may, the current standing of the law is that school districts, like any other property owner, even though they're their own unit of local government, must go through the same zoning process as any other property owner. However, under Illinois law, the village board and the P&Z Commission, when they're considering an application from a school district or a park district, if there were such a thing, in Riverside there isn't, but if there were, or another unit of local government, must give deference to any zoning relief that is requested that is tied to that unit of local government's statutory mission. So in the case of a school, it's the education and safety of the children under its care. That's the purpose of the school. That's why it exists statutorily. So while you might not have, you might not see a sufficient basis to grant a variation for another property owner without that statutory mission, you have to give deference to the school district's statutory mission.
Okay. Is that clear to everyone? So they don't have to show hardship for the fence, for example, but they have to prove that the fence is for the safety and
Correct.
development of the
That
children.
that it's important to the safety of the children.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gallagher, please.
No, I just had a question. The area just north of the basketball court and between the green space, is that where the 4 square play lots are going to be at?
Correct, yeah.
So they can play lunch ball?
Yeah, that would be permeable concrete, is what we're proposing, which would obviously help our permeability on the site.
Okay. It's a big thing at lunch, that's why.
Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Hannan.
First of all, I want to thank all the residents that came out today. I watched the planning and zoning meeting. Thank you for coming out then as well. And, you know, having done this a couple months ago, a couple years ago, it all blends together. You know, very sympathetic to what I heard the issues being raised. Number one, the position of the fence and the buffer. You know, number two was the lighting. I heard a little bit of concern from the neighbor on if the lighting was going to be intrusive onto theirs. And what we had at, you know, another playground installation, you know, was the noise from the playground, described as a small roar of an airplane engine when the kids were out there, which is great. But if you went from no noise to an airplane engine, you'd hope there'd be some way to address that. And one observation, and when it was suggested by one of the planning and zoning commissioners that the fence be put back, at least what I heard was that you wanted to maximize the play area, and that bringing the fence back to the required street yard would encroach on that and minimize the play area. And so in looking at the site plan, I'm looking at the basketball courts and the playground area, but I'm seeing raised planters that seem to take up space but don't create play area. And so in light of the request to move the fences out of the street yard, could you explain what those purpose of those raised planters and what would the problem be of just moving that play area down the required feet so we can sort of satisfy the neighborhood request?
Yeah, I guess I'd need to clarify. I mean, to first part of your question, the raised planters, that's seen as really an outdoor classroom, a gathering space. So that's how that would be utilized. So it's part plantings, and it's also part sitting wall where they would hold class there. As far as if you look, the line of the existing building is denoted on that site plan. Everything to the east of that, or page north, would be the street yard. So, you know, for the variation that we're asking for is the red line going perpendicular from the building, and then the one going parallel to Aiken side. So those would be around the recreation field, and those are the ones that are in the street yard. So I think that the fencing around the playground itself is not in the street yard, and so is not part of that variation, if I'm correct, Dan.
I get that.
So are you saying that right now you have 173 feet of fence? Are you saying that would make a significant difference to the play area if that went from 173 to 168?
I mean, for conversational purposes, if we look at 172 feet times 5 feet, that's roughly 4,000 square feet of play area. So, I mean, it is, yes, that is something that the school district is looking to maximize. I mean, that is part of education It is part of what they, try to do, is to get the kids out in PE, to have more usable space to be able to do that. The number of PE classes and, recess at both schools make it very challenging to have enough space for everyone to use. So it is, while 5 feet doesn't seem like a lot, over the span of 172 feet, it ends up being quite a large chunk of the playground. Go ahead.
But if you're looking to maximize play space, and you just explained to me that you have outdoor classroom space that could become play space to replace what would be lost in moving the fence. So net, you could accommodate us, but you're telling us that you need the play space, but you're not willing to change any other plan to substitute that play place for another play place.
No, I think we can, there are adjustments that we can make, but I think pulling the, if we look at the shape of a ball field and the shape of a soccer field, we're sort of encumbered by the building itself, so there's only so far that we can pull that down until it ends up being really at an angle. So we want to maintain, part of this is we want to maintain fire access all the way around the building. So you'll see that fire lane, that's an important constraint that we've been dealing with that doesn't allow us to pull that field much further down. So that has informed the shape of the field itself and where it's located. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm very familiar with the field. I watched my kids play in the dirt when the outfield was the parking lot, so I get it. I actually would love to hear, if the landscape architect is here, how much of a buffer is needed for the plantings that are required. And to make sure that, if we do grant this 10 feet, what would be planted there? What do they need to grow? What's typical? It doesn't seem like enough, but I'm not.
Could ask our if you'd like to hear from our landscape architect. You could just talk about that specifically.
Before you do that, I'm not following this line of thought, because we don't have a site plan to, I'm not sure what you're.
I'm looking at page 224.
You're looking at a site plan.
Yeah, and the question would be, if you go to the top of the page, they have the fence.
Along Aiken side.
Right, and that's the red.
You're talking about their ability to shift everything back toward the building to provide a greater buffer?
To create more, right.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I
Yeah.
wasn't sure. But, okay, understood, thank you.
Is that a good angle? Can everybody see?
Which slide is that?
Can you give this to Doug?
I'm sorry, which slide is that?
That's
Is that
226.
226?
Since the last meeting, we had the sidewalk closer to the property line. The new sidewalk now is remaining the same. So our planting space is actually increased or back to where, close to where it was. So we redrew the plan.
Which is what?
Again, from the 10 feet to the 20.
So it's this 10-foot 10 to 21-foot 10?
21.
Okay.
But so, again, from the first plan, I pretty much changed everything, because I do have more room now. And what we did do is introduce upright evergreens, which on site right now, there are literally no evergreens. So we're trying to create a couple of buffers of arborvitae that would create a solid curtain of evergreen. This variety too is green giant, and by the book, once established, can grow 3 to 5 feet a year. So it's a pretty quick growing plant, and we're proposing that they come in at 8 foot to start. There are a lot of lilacs on this buffer area right now, and they're scattered throughout both on our side and in the right-of-way side. So, and I know the neighbors were real concerned about the lilacs, so what I tried to do was to work in a newer variety of lilac that will get in the basically 8 to 12 foot height I've got some viburnum on the sides that'll get in the 8-foot range. And then I try to do underplanting from the buffer area out to the sidewalk. Oops.
I'll bring it closer so you can.
Oh.
Not too far away.
So again, just did some layering, so the view from Aiken side and down the street is very pleasing compared, I mean, well, last meeting, I mean, we still had a nice plan, but this gives us more, and we've got more variety, more color, evergreen that wasn't there, and actually too, the arborvitae, back to the sound issues, when they create that curtain, they actually make a good sound buffer as well too. We didn't go all the way across because there's an existing tree now that we're able to keep that wasn't there last meeting, but just working around it and again, working the lilacs in there. And so I've got 8 larger lilacs behind the tree, and I've also got some got dwarf Korean lilac in there as well. So trying to get as many lilac back as possible, but also have other things turning on and off, you know, from early spring, you know, through the fall, and then evergreen balance, which again, on site, there are literally no evergreens on this whole side of the building.
Can I ask my question again?
Sure.
What width is needed for the evergreens that you described? And what width is needed for these lilacs that you described?
I have these actually shown at their mature width, so I mean, the arbs are in the 8 to 10 foot width. Over here is where it's just a little tighter. We got more room. We have more room in here. If it is an issue, because we're going to be talking with the arborist. Actually, I tried to communicate with him today. I think he's on vacation until next week. But with this, I mean, we could actually have, you know, change the green giant to Techni. You know, there's other varieties that don't get quite as wide, but the reason I chose these is because of their growth rate and size at maturity. What's that? Oh yeah, we have that. We have the width for it. Yes.
Trustee Marshowska, you had a question?
Yes. Do you have a landscape plan or proposal for what's going in the raised planters?
Yes. I mean, everything is spec'd out.
I'm trying to find
on
that.
the property too. All the trees.
I mean in the planters. I'm sorry. I'm trying to find that on the plan and I can't
right up
see
against
it.
right up against the building.
Right. What is it? What's in there?
I've got fire spire hornbeam in the planters here, red bud in these planters, hackberry in the corners. So all the trees on site are all native.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just a little bit concerned because that is on I believe, the northwest side of the building, pretty much adjacent to the building, and that will not get a lot of light in there.
Well, the plants all along the building here are that's all been taken into consideration.
Okay, I feel like there could be, to Trustee Hannon's point, some potential, if there's maintenance that's going to be involved with the planters and those beds, that maybe that you could consider a reconfiguration there or something, and moving the fence back a little bit.
And back to the fence too, again, with this planting here, from Aiken Side Road, probably at initial planting, that fence is gonna disappear visually from what's going in here. And for sure, over the course of a year or so, the only place, you'll only be able to see the fence from the ball field on the side. There's no doubt about that.
Does that answer your question? Mr. Powell?
I wasn't understanding at first, but now I do understand what you're talking about. But you may have answered this, but I see 2 athletic fields. I see a baseball, outline of a baseball field. I see the outline of what looks like a soccer field closer to Aiken side. Am I reading that correct? It's not identified, at least I guess.
Yes, you're reading that correct.
So what's to prevent moving the soccer field back toward the building 10 feet and moving the fence 10 feet, unless you've got really big kids who are pole hitters, hitting it over the fence.
I mean, really, the only thing preventing us is the fire access lane. If you look all the way down to the bottom of the recreation
But
field.
don't change that.
Well, then that's it's simply a reduction in the size of the recreation field. And so, I mean, the district has placed an importance on outdoor PE, recess, and play activity as an educational importance. So, again, that's why we try to maximize that. Those are the thoughts behind
But
that.
as a practical matter, the soccer field could move 10 feet, I guess it'd be to the west, away from Aiken side, and you'd still have full use of a soccer field, full use of a baseball field.
Yeah, technically it could.
And you would be able to move the fence back a little bit and have more depth in that landscape yard. But you don't want to do that because it's 10 feet less of open space.
Well, I mean, again, that is
It's
the
not 10
rationale.
feet less
And
of
so,
open space, it's 10 feet less of recreational space.
10 feet less of recreational space across that property line. And so, again, looking at the plantings, we tried to, work with Paul to make sure that we were providing enough space, for the plantings that are proposed.
There's a fence there now. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just want to make sure I understand instructions from council as it relates to the fence. To the extent that the request for the variance is consistent with the school's mission of safety and education, we are supposed to defer to the school's statutory mission of safety and education.
Yeah, give deference. It doesn't mean you absolutely have no judgment to make, but you have to give deference to it, so.
Is that not the same as deferring?
Well, it would, it's a case-by-case analysis if there's a dispute over it, right, in the courts, but the language is deference, so.
I don't know that I understand, but I, in my view on this particular issue of the 10 feet, it's not just 10 feet, it's 4,000 square feet, I think was the number suggested here when we're talking about space being used for education and play space in an already limited set of facilities relative to our peers in other communities. And so to me, the 4,000 square feet is material and in support of the school's mission of safety and education. I do commend the district, I commend the community and the engagement on this issue. I think this is a critical issue. Schools are critical to our community and a vital piece of our community. And so I'm pleased to have seen so much participation at planning and zoning and participation here tonight. I do believe our facilities are often suboptimal relative to other communities. And so I'm grateful that the district is looking for ways to improve the conditions of our schools, both for our children in the community, for our property values, for the safety with respect to pickup and drop off at Central Hauser area in particular is of particular concern to me. I believe student outcomes are tremendously impacted when they are limited in their ability to utilize outside space, which I believe these schools are experiencing now because of some of the design, the space limitations, the water issues. Students are often either prevented from having outside recess on a regular basis, or they're limited to a small area of parking lot. And so I believe all of these are consistent with the school's statutory mission of safety and education, and then we should be giving them deference if they're asking for this 5 feet that we're talking about.
Thank you. Mr. Hannan?
I guess I look at deference a little bit different in the educational purpose. And the question that I would like to get an answer to is this loss of this 5 feet, and I'll assume it's 4,000 square feet, does that cause the play area to be inadequate? Or are you just going with the theory, more is better?
That's
And I'd
tough.
love to hear from somebody with an educational background, no offense to an architect, but I don't think you can opine on that issue.
I was going to say the same thing. We don't have anyone with an educational background here from the district.
I'm sorry, I thought the petitioner was here.
Jim Fitton is here, who's the business manager, but Dr. Martha Ryan Toy was not able to be here tonight.
Okay.
So that would be That would be the educational background from the district.
Chip?
So I'm sorry, there's been a lot of site plans for me to try to digest, and I just wanted to follow up on a resident's comment. So is there any relief that you can provide to the resident as far as the fence? And do you have a fence and then lilac trees? Is that what it is?
Are you asking me? Yeah. It's really the buffer. Like right now, we have.
Ma'am, if you wouldn't mind, I'm sorry. I watched the planning and zoning. When people started talking in the audience, you missed everything.
No, right now, it's just the issue of the landscape buffer space. So we have 20 to 25 feet now, and in addition to the fence, they're cutting down that landscape buffer feet to, in some spaces, 10 feet wide. I mean, you're going to put one arborvitae there in 10 feet. So that's all we're asking, is if you could make this, and it's not just for the neighbors. This is a main street in the community. And I think that we have a responsibility to protect the visuals of everything. And it's for all of us. It's not just for the Akenside neighbors.
Thank you. There's a fence there now. There's the backstop, and then there's a small 8-foot piece of fence.
Yeah, it's essentially a backstop fence.
How far is that fence from the sidewalk?
That's a good question. I don't know. I'd have to, I can measure it on the site. It is more than 5 feet from the sidewalk. I can tell you that. But we can give you an exact dimension.
It's more than 5 feet?
It's toward the school, more than 5 feet from the existing sidewalk.
I mean, the only reason I ask is because I drove by that place several times, and I didn't even notice that fence was there. Because there's a lot of screening in front of it. So I'm trying to figure out what that screening buffer is that was there that hid that fence. Would be what I would think would be the same type of screening buffer needed to hide another fence. So
Sure.
if that fence is 8 feet off the sidewalk or 10 feet off the sidewalk, that's where I'm trying to get to thought to.
Right, I understand.
If you're going to go up there.
I think slide 227 attempts to show that.
I see it, yes. But it doesn't show me so that's the other fence that, no, this is not a fence here. This is a curve.
But you can see where they have.
I can
where it
see the
says
little
bench.
fence. Right,
That's near where the fencing is.
correct.
How far is that?
But I don't think this is a fence because it curves. This dotted line here is not a fence.
No.
That's the property line.
That's the property line. Right, that's way up here.
Oh, we're talking about the other.
No, that's not a fence. That's the property line.
Yeah.
This is where the bench is, and this is the backstop, right here. So right. So we need to know how far.
Yeah, I could get you an exact dimension, but it looks like, from the scale, it's about 15 feet from the existing sidewalk, that fence existing.
Okay, thank you. That helps me with my proportion. Thank
Sure.
you. Ms. Evans?
Is there a light plan?
There is. It was included in your packet. I think it's,
2 pages past the landscape plan.
yeah, it's sheet 235. So we're proposing 5 new light poles, LED light poles, 4 in the parking lot, and then 1 at that outdoor classroom area. And as you can see, there's a lot of little numbers, but there's 0 light at the lot lines.
Okay, and this is the first time that the light pole plan has been shown, correct?
Correct. We have not gone through site plan review
Because
yet.
I remember that everyone kind of looked cross-eyed at each other when you said light poles. And am I also correct that you're putting cameras on those light poles?
Yeah, that was something that was discussed, and it's definitely infrastructure that we're going to provide.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Pollack.
Does the light plan include wall packs on the building?
No, we're not doing any wall packs on the
So
building.
there'll be no
So
lighting on the side of the building?
there is some existing now, but we're not replacing any of that, so that's not
But
included.
does your photometrics incorporate that?
It does not, just the new light poles.
Would any of the lights off the buildings be taken down because you have these lights now? Because I do remember some of the residents saying that they can see themselves in their living room even though it's quote-unquote your dark sky. I think.
Well, those are not part of our plan, so I don't know that they all comply with the dark sky principles. That's something that we can discuss, the wall packs that are existing. I mean, they are probably, if they aren't new, they probably don't have that shielded hood that you'd see at new LED wall packs. But again, it's not part of this plan, so it's not something we're addressing, but it's certainly something we can discuss.
Back to page 227. Which is the only plan I can really read here really well. Sorry.
227 is the existing survey.
Yeah, trying to figure out. Well, I saw a couple things. One is half your parking lot was pavers. Is that still?
That is still the case, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The other question I had is, you have 4 handicap parking spots.
Correct.
This is only my personal observation of the last 2 times that I've gone to a grocery store in Michigan and seen the car from the handicap parking spot career into the propane tank storage department. Does it make sense for handicap spots to be facing a playground? Or would those best be put either against the wall or in the center mediums?
We would have wheel stops in front of where the vehicle actually would be. The idea is to get them as close to the accessible entrance as possible, so we can maintain that accessible path. So that was, in organizing this to prioritize that as well as pick up and drop off, that seemed like the right location.
Okay. The other thing is, I remember one of the residents, I believe it was Mr. Sachi, the gentleman that lives in the apartments right to your north, said something that struck with me. He goes, yeah, I bought this house next to a school and I understand that and I live with that. But with that being said, I don't necessarily want more. And that's when, the motion was made that the backstop can't be moved any farther back. The thing is, the school is open till 4 o'clock, and there's no gate that shuts this off. So this park is open later than our village parks. I mean, it's open to, I think, till 9 is I think that's what the Ames is, Blythe, or Ames park is. And what happens is, after a certain hour, the village becomes the security team because the residents call the village to say, hey, can you come over and get these kids out of the park?
Sure.
And I'm trying to alleviate that for 2 reasons. One is the village is not the private security team. It's like me putting a koi pond in my backyard and then calling Fish and Wildlife because the raccoons come there. I created the nuisance. I should be able to, alleviate that. So one of the thoughts that I had is if you're putting lights and cameras, is there any thought that the Riverside Police Department would have access to those cameras?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we definitely, I won't speak for the district necessarily, but I think that's probably something that they would allow the police department access to now. I mean, I think that case wouldn't be any different. And we've talked to Commissioner Buckley on several occasions about what strategies are the best strategies, whether it be more lighting or less lighting. There's kind of 2 schools of thought. The more you light it, the more they will come. But obviously, it wants to be safe. Those poles are opportunities for cameras. We We've talked about blue light that, on the camera that sort of, whether it's going to the police department or not, indicates that you are being watched. So some of those deterrents are things that, the district is certainly willing to employ. They want to make this a community benefit, not just a school benefit. So allowing the community, to partake in that. Reality is, no matter what, we do or what strategies we employ, we can't stop everything. So those are conversations that we continue to have.
I mean, those are some of the questions that I would personally like to have. I think the village would like to have answers to before this thing moves too far forward.
In terms of, would the police department have access?
Things
think
like
we
that. Is there any other things that you feel are, I mean, this is an opportunity for us to opine on a site plan before it's finalized. Is there any omissions or ideas that anyone would like to float? Mr. Pollack?
Yeah, couple of the variations are for the size of the parking lot landscaping, the perimeter along Aiken side, where
Correct.
in some places it meets the 10-foot, other places it doesn't, correct?
That is correct.
And then the width of the landscape islands and the number of landscape islands.
Correct.
I guess, and you don't have to answer this now, but it sounds like we might be tabling this anyway, because there's a lot of information that we want to see, but did you do a site plan that was compliant? And if so, how many parking spaces did you lose when you did that?
Yes, we did a site plan that was compliant, meaning with the landscape islands.
Right.
We did. I mean, I can tell you essentially we would lose the number of spaces that were lacking. I mean, that if we would lose, the difference between 114 and 87. So, trying to balance providing more parking, but also a safe drop-off, more recreation space, all of those things, were, played into, the design that we came up with.
Well, I am concerned about whether or not that meets the requirements for a variation. Now, keeping in mind what our village attorney advised us, but in this case, with the fence, I kind of get it, safety and education.
Sure.
Not comfortable with it, but with this one, it seems like this would go back to our standard variation findings, because unless they're saying there is a safety and education aspect to that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speculate
Yeah,
on their theory,
right.
and I wouldn't think it would be appropriate for me to, but I think you're right to some extent to say that if what they want to do, what the district wants to do is related to, let's say, aesthetics of the way they want to do things, then that's not related, to the mission. But if the parking spaces are tied to the overall safety and the operation of how cars, like where they would go if there weren't enough spaces, and if that would create a potential hazard and they feel that they're trying to solve for that or make it better, then it could.
Sure.
And I just want to come back to something, this is not a, as Lance say, you have to do this or you can't do this. It's not that simple. There's a give and take.
Right.
It is case by case, but you're pointing out important things.
I mean, I can just see in looking at the site plan without doing any calculations, your 4 islands that sit out alone at the end of the parking rows, those are undersized.
Correct.
Width. So obviously, to make those compliant, you'd lose 4 parking spaces. Right?
Correct. Yep.
So there's one aspect of the plan that I think could pretty easily be modified. My concern about the width of those is nothing will grow in there. I mean, ideally, you want to put parkway trees or shade trees in those islands. And those, I don't know, how wide are those, 3 or 5 feet?
Yes, they are.
But they're
5
pretty
feet.
narrow, and
They are. Yep.
they're just going to be, they're going to be difficult to maintain. Nothing of substance will grow in there, I don't think. So that's one small tweak that I think would help a lot. Because you almost might as well not have them if, all they do is, they do provide the benefit of traffic control, even if they are too narrow for landscaping, but they don't provide any shade in the parking lot, which is the reason they exist, one of the reasons.
And just, if I can speak, I guess I look at it a little differently, that shrinking the islands goes to the number of parking space issue and the variance to get below 144. And by shrinking the islands, they maximize what can be used as recreational space. So if they were to lose 4 parking spaces at least, would they need to shrink the field even more to add additional parking spaces? So I think there's, a color of an educational purpose in asking for that variance. So again, it's not crystal clear, but I guess that's how I justified it in my mind.
There's a note here that says install a 10-foot wide sidewalk instead of the maximum 5-foot wide sidewalk, perpendicular Aiken side. Where am I seeing this 10-foot?
So that runs directly along the recreation field, in between the recreation field and the parking lots. So it's labeled as pedestrian bicycle walkway.
Which page are we on?
We're on page 224.
You can see it over here.
Yeah. It's a little far for me, thank you.
And the colorized site plan is page 224.
Okay, so this is 10 foot wide? This is what I'm looking at?
So the thought behind that,
I'm sorry. This sidewalk?
They'll replace this sidewalk. This new sidewalk will connect to that.
This is the sidewalk. So this sidewalk is, this one right here is 10 feet.
This is what they're installing at 10 feet, and then.
Okay, so it's the 10 feet, the one that runs.
Right.
Okay, so it's not the one that runs on Aiken side.
No, it's the one that runs perpendicular to Aiken side.
Okay,
so
thank
the
you.
thought on that is, again.
It's okay, I get it.
Okay.
I just thought it was on Aiken side, thank you.
Sure.
I was trying to see it. Did you have any questions, sir?
Yes, sir.
You're-
I did, if I may.
You may.
I hope this is not inappropriate, but I'm a retired citizen of this village for 16 years. This is the first time I've ever been to one of your meetings. I'm pretty impressed. I just had a slight suggestion. Honestly, I am. I'm also impressed by how young you all are. Well, but understand who there that's coming from, you understand? I just had a quick suggestion. It's been very interesting listening to this and the pros and the cons. It seems like the longer you speak, the more issues you come up with rather than the fewer issues. I've been in business, I was in business for a long time. So I've had to see a lot of things. My suggestion to you, would it make a difference if several of you went out and actually looked at what you're talking about, rather than sitting here with plans trying to visualize what this means? And of course, some of you know the area, so you may may visualize better than others. But I've always believed that going out and actually seeing something is really important.
I agree with
And
you
I
100%.
also have found out, dealing with people over many, many years, is that people always want more than they need. I'm telling you, always. That's all I have to say. It's nice to be here.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you coming. And, we're on TV too, so you can watch us even when you go back home if you miss it. And just for clarity's sake, I don't know, as I said for the last gentleman, if he saw me riding in front of his house for the last 7 days, this board does a very good job getting out to the property and visiting it, and we're all, many of us, many of our children went here. I taught baseball on this court, so I've been here for a long time, so, but if you looked at these, you would, Okay. I think that's all the questions I was having. Any other questions before we entertain a motion to accept these variances, a motion to continue till we get the final site plan, or a motion to do whatever? So is there any other questions before I ask for a motion? Okay. Then I will entertain a motion
I make a motion to approve,
as approved by the PZC.
as approved unanimously by the PZC.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second to that motion? Sorry, Megan?
I think that motion dies for lack of second then, right?
I
Correct.
believe it does.
Okay.
Do I have another motion? Mr. Pollak?
Sure, I'll make a motion to continue this to a date certain, 2 weeks from now, I suppose, or 4 weeks, or whatever the petitioner's comfortable with, so that we can get more information, photometric plan that incorporates the wall lights and their impact on the overall photometrics. The site plan that we have still shows that the recreation field may be synthetic, and I'd like the approved site, the plan of record, to clearly show that that's landscaping. And I think, eventually, as a condition of any landscaping variations which are requested, I think that's important because that compensates for you're removing landscaping some area. We want to make sure that that natural areas exist elsewhere. And they've already said that they're okay with that. And there may have been other issues that came up here tonight. I don't recall now, but I'd like to have those come back to us. So my motion is to table it for 2 weeks.
And I will add that one of the things that I asked was the access to the security cameras. I think that's very important if we're the ones that are the security force.
And I think the issue I raised was, there's a reduction in the ball field by that 10-foot, 4,000-foot area, make the play area inadequate from an educational point of view.
So justifying the ball field, or the size of the ball field.
Why the reduction would
Why,
not be
yeah.
appropriate.
So with reduction of either 5 feet or 10 feet, something like that. Okay, simple.
Further than was made this evening. Correct.
To add more of at least a 5-foot buffer
Okay.
to this. I think everyone's understands, and we're all supportive of the school district, 100%. All of our kids, well, all of my kids went there. I coached on that field. We want the school to thrive. We want our children to thrive. We want them to be outside as much as possible. So we're all in this. But I mean, this is our last bite at this apple because we don't have final site plan review. So we want to make sure that some of the things that we're talking about gets relayed, and then the answers get back to us. So.
Sure. Could I ask for one clarification? Would this need to come back after planning and zoning site plan review, or is this, when do we come back with this?
You'd have to come back because we have to approve the variations, correct?
Correct.
We're not correct.
I'm just trying to
Yeah.
They have to go to PZC.
understand the next steps of the process.
Your next step of the process is finishing the site, bringing a completed site plan to the PZC.
Okay.
And have them approve your final site plan, and then the whole package will come back to us, and then, which we will then make the zoning variations, approve or deny the zoning variation.
Okay, so we couldn't come back before site plan review happens.
I thought that's what I was, I'm sorry, where did I miss?
The motion was to just table this for 2 weeks.
Right.
I personally, I don't see any of these things as requiring further planning and zoning commission review.
I'm sorry,
I think they're
I misspoke.
relatively minor issues. I would defer to staff if they feel differently, but
Okay, so you're saying just to the next board meeting?
yeah.
Okay, just
Yeah,
answer
provided
questions.
that gives them time. If it doesn't, they should, we can
It's ample
Okay,
time.
I'm
push it
I'm
back
sorry,
further.
I misconstrued his motion, I'm sorry, Doug.
do not intend for them to have to go back to planning and zoning, right?
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Further discussion would be Ms. Evans.
I just want to make sure we are going to get a complete site plan with this 2 weeks, in 2 weeks.
I don't believe we will. Correct.
That's the intent, if
Isn't that what
I
it
guess
said?
the applicant.
Well, it won't be- Sorry, it won't be approved.
Right,
Because
that's-
planning and
that's the
zoning,
distinction.
that
Okay,
goes to the
Yeah.
separate meeting. So I guess
There'll be a
be
completed
draft.
site plan that's ready to go to P and Z, but the P and Z may not have weighed in on it yet, under
Complete
trustee
new draft.
Pollock's.
So you have 2 weeks to get a completed site plan done.
Okay.
I
By
just
completed, we
wanna be-
mean
I'm sorry.
answering all the questions that we've talked about this evening?
Correct.
Okay, fair. Thank you.
I just want to be clear, and the village attorney can help me with this. If they come back and satisfy these questions that we've raised, I would hope that that's the end.
I don't know that that's a legal question, but,
Well, I guess it's a staff question for the zoning ordinance and the site plan approval process. I would view the site plan, would view the changes that we're requesting are potentially conditions to the variations.
that's correct.
And that they do not materially impact the site plan that was already approved by Planning and Zoning Commission, and therefore it would not have to go back to Planning and Zoning.
It hasn't been approved,
Hasn't been
sorry, I
approved
don't mean to interrupt.
Oh, it hasn't? I'm
Right,
sorry.
that's the issue, yeah.
I'm sorry. Never mind.
Yeah, and I think the thinking of everyone to some degree is that these variations are largely tied to that site plan, and it helps to analyze the variations. They can be phrased as conditions, and then the P and Z Commission, when it considers the site plan, if the board has imposed those conditions, will have to honor them.
No, I apologize. I missed that.
With that clarity, is your motion still the same?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and just further discussion on the motion. I know there was some disagreement at the board level on those landscape islands, but I'm still very concerned about the width of those and whether they're going to be worth even having at that narrow width. I suppose you could put bushes in them, but.
I mean, really, at that point, they serve as a safety measure to separate,
Right.
vehicular traffic from parked cars.
But will you, I believe the code would require shade trees in those islands.
We are showing 2-inch diameter shade trees.
And your landscape architect believes they'll grow and thrive in those islands?
They've been squeezed in tighter spaces.
Okay.
And they adapt at a smaller size, 2.5-inch caliper going in, as opposed to trying to put a 3 or 4-inch caliper tree in to start out with.
Okay.
Okay, so we have,
Can't adapt.
okay, so we have a motion and a second to delay this to our next board meeting, which is April 20th. Okay?
And then when does P and Z take a look at it again?
P and Z will not take a look at it by then. We will they will bring us the final site plan, and
And
then
then we send over P and Z again?
We'll send
And when does that happen for P and Z?
the
End of
next
month?
P and Z meeting is
26th.
26th.
And then we'll finally approve it first
No,
meeting of
we will approve, we will
No.
either approve or deny it next week.
Once they've done it, it's
Right,
done.
the one important thing is if the variations are approved prior to the site plan, and the variations contain certain conditions that affect the site plan, the P and Z Commission will be bound by those.
Correct.
All right.
Okay? We have a motion and a second. Ethan, would you please call the roll?
Trustee Evans.
Aye.
Trustee Pollock.
Aye.
Trustee Clarity.
Nay.
Trustee Marjaska. Trustee Hannan. Trustee Galagos.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
I was ready to go. Trustee reports and cross-climate collaborative. Trustee Marsh Osga.
All right. Well, as you can see from the summary, we had a C4 area meeting on March 13th, and many guest speakers from the county came and presented on various programs, including the Solar Town Hall that will be held Earth Day, April 22nd, which mayors, schools, and up to 1,500 residents can attend at the Ironworkers Local 63 in Broadview. So there will be presentations by Solstice, Illinois, which is an Illinois Solar for All company that assists low-income residents in obtaining percentages off their electric bills. Cook County's Grow Solar program, which is a group buy, will be presented there. They also announced that there will be a green landscaping technology virtual town hall to be held Thursday, July 20th from 10 to 11:30. They have held, since then, deep dive info sessions on their brownfields programs. And that was it from the area C4 meeting. But our C4 Riverside team did meet at the end of last month, actually last Thursday. And we discussed that our priority groups are going to be finishing their high-level analyses, parts A and B, of the community input that was received from the Road to 2050 Engagement Event and Companion Survey. And in the meantime, while that is happening, to get residents thinking about reducing their environmental impact in a positive way, we have partnered with the Parks and Rec Department on an Earth Day bingo activity, which has gone live as of tonight. This is a Department of Energy sponsored activity where residents can send in a photo of themselves doing each energy-saving activity on the bingo card, and once they successfully submit those photos, they are eligible for fabulous prizes from Parks and Recreation, including discounts off of programs and a grand prize, which will occur through drawing of a free scout cabin rental. So this is very exciting, and there's a lot of motivation for people to get those energy-saving activities done, get those bingo cards in. The C4 team has also assembled a robust calendar of Earth Month events, sponsored by local groups that the village will be promoting via social media. Finally, we are going to begin presenting the top ideas from the community through a series of surveys, one for each of the 6 priority areas in the C4. So that would be health, well-being, place, it would be prosperity, connectivity, living infrastructure, and then resource regeneration, which covers energy-related and waste-related items. So we are going to have those surveys start rolling out about mid-month, one a week, for 6 weeks, and it's going to be very exciting. And after that, actually not after that, I would just like to highlight some of the activities that are going to be happening during Earth Month. One is sponsored by the Community Garden, the Riverside Community Garden. They will be offering 2 different composting training sessions, one on Wednesday, April 19th at 5 p.m., and the next at April 22nd, which is Earth Day, at 10 a.m., where they will be meeting at the Riverside Community Garden at 400 Nuttall Road and providing training.
Sir?
He forgot his coat.
Providing training for composting. And the volunteers who attend these events will also receive a 5-gallon composting bucket for free that they can take home with them. This program of the community garden diverted over 3,000 pounds of food waste last year and encouraged many residents to confidently start composting in their own backyards. So that's exciting. And in addition to that, I would like to highlight an opportunity that I hope all volunteer groups in Riverside will come out for. It is April 15th, which is a Saturday, from 9 to 12. The RB Day of Service is back again, and they are partnering with the Village of Riverside and Frederick Law Olmsted Society. And I have been told that there are other community groups that are going to come out this day and join with all the kids from RB to help clean up our parks. So the meeting place is in Indian Gardens at 9 a.m. And from there, teams will be deployed out to definitely Indian Gardens and Guthrie Park, possibly also Patriots Park. So keep an eye out for all of the great social media calendar items that are going to be coming your way to celebrate Earth Day this year. Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Evans?
I just wanted to let everyone know that the Friends of the Library will be kicking off their annual membership drive. So become a 2023 member, donate today. Your membership supports summer reading programs, accessibility projects, STEM equipment, library furnishings, and more. You donate any amount to become a member. We will be sending out a mailing probably within the next week or so with a QR code that you can conveniently use to make a donation and become a member, or you can write a check and drop it off at the library.
Thank you. Aberdeen, if I can ask you one question on the compost. When you take the 5-gallon bucket and fill it with your waste, are you supposed to take it back to the community garden and put it in their bins, or you were supposed to compost it in our own backyards?
You can do either way.
Okay, so they do have the ability that we can collect our waste.
And bring it to
Bring it to them and put it in theirs. Okay, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Joe, one more thing.
Yes, Mr. Gallegos.
Okay, so in keeping with a cleaner environment, Hoffman River Rats, Dam River Rats are going to have their 51st annual spring cleanup, semi-annual cleanup. That will take place on Saturday the 29th from 9 to noon. This is done in collaboration with the Cook County Forest Reserves, which will provide the bags and the poker sticks. There will be some light refreshments as well. So cleaner parks, cleaner rivers are, time for spring right now. They'll meet at the Forest Reserve, which is east of the Berry Point Bridge and right by the Hoffman Tower.
Yeah, no, there are all
Clean up
kinds
life,
of
yeah.
great events happening this month. There's great library presentations. It's a good time to get out and about in Riverside. The spring has energized us all.
Thank you. Before we adjourn, I'd like to congratulate Trustee Evans, Trustee Gallegos, and Trustee-elect Joe Mateo to the village board. I know it was a hard-fought campaign, but we appreciate your dedication to our village for another 4 years, and Joe for another 4 years on top of your 10 years. So thank you very much. The board has a need for an executive session this evening to discuss appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of employees or legal counsel. The board will not convene. No final action will take place. So I would ask for a motion and a second to adjourn to executive session.
Motion made.
Motion by Trustee Gallegos, second.
Second.
Second by Trustee Marshazga. Ethan?
Trustee Evans?
Aye.
Trustee Pollock?
Aye.
Trustee Clarity?
Aye.
Trustee Marshazga?
Aye.
Trustee Hannan? Trustee Gallagher?
Aye.
Motion carries. Meeting adjourned.